You're very welcome back to the show. Now, my next guest is an expert at helping people detach from toxic relationships, emotions, and situations in their life. A trait that many are distancing themselves from is toxic masculinity. Now, God, I can't even talk today. Anyway, so what actually is it, and how can we fight it? Psychotherapist Carl Melvin, thank you for chatting to us about this topic today. The topic that I can't even pronounce. Whatever's wrong with me, I don't know. But
I might
toxic.
struggle myself, Elaine, to be honest.
Toxic masculinity. That term is bandied around so much. What is it? What exactly is it?
Well, I think it's interesting because it can be interpreted in different ways, and I think sometimes we often associate it with demonizing men or creating associations with aggressive behavior or dominant behavior. But there's other ways of viewing it. Personally, as a therapist, I suppose I'm looking at it from the perspective the pressures that men feel to create this constant facade of being independent or looking independent and being completely self-reliant and not being successful and not depending on other people. And the problem is that becomes your template for what it is to be a man and how to live your life. And it really blocks your capacity to access your own emotions and acknowledge what's actually happening inside of you. And it really gets in the way then of actually talking to somebody about it and sharing it. So you become trapped inside your own reality and stuck with your own emotions. And it can be a cocktail for any amount of physical and mental health issues.
What examples would you have to kind of not dumb down, but like to explain what it can be? Because it's not all about aggression and violence and things like that. It can be a lot more subtle.
It can be, you're right, and it manifests itself in different ways. I mean, yeah, the kind of the cliches of people being bravado and aggressive and all the rest is probably one aspect of it. But I think it can be subtle. Sometimes you see it in the workplace. Someone is driven to succeed and they won't accept any kind of failure, but they also won't accept help or support of other people, and they become very conscious of their image within that environment. In other cases, someone could be devoted to their family, which is a positive thing, but it isn't if they insist on being the only breadwinner or the only person who does everything within the family, and they won't accept help or support or distribute the load. But it can be quite subtle, as you said there. And one subtle way that I see it is just kind of rigid stoicism, where you're not allowed to complain about anything. Or if you open up in any way, you're perceived as complaining or not accepting your lot of life and maybe being ungrateful. And stoicism is okay. And I mean, there's times in life where we need to endure our hardships with dignity, but it becomes maladaptive when it's the only way, and it gets in the way of acknowledging exactly how we're feeling at the moment. And it may be distress, and anxiety is quite prevalent in our society, maybe more so now than ever with the pandemic that we've been dealing with.
Yeah. How has the COVID pandemic, do you think, affected it? Do you think it's exacerbated the situation for many men?
Absolutely. And it's, even for me, I'm quite an independent person, or I view myself as a very independent person, but it probably affected me more than I was even prepared to admit. And I think it was a crisis on many different levels. I mean, the obvious crisis is that so many people were physically affected by this virus, but even those who didn't actually get it. There's a status crisis because many people lost their jobs or they're put on leave, and that affected their capacity to earn. And again, if that's how you identify yourself, then you're going to be rocked by that. I think it's a social crisis. We're not able to engage with people, and we are social creatures. We literally have a social engagement system inside of us that helps us to connect with other people. But if we're not able to connect in a healthy way, then we're left isolated, and again, that can create all manner of mental health issues or emotional issues, that we're not able to express ourselves, we're not able to just bond with other people. But I think it was a relational crisis as well, because, I mean, let's say you had an elderly parent and you want to protect them and you want to look after them, but you feel powerless to do it and actually do something effective, and you're just left worrying. And I think it was a funny time, this lockdown, because I think a lot of people just felt trapped. And the problem is, and there was this kind of overarching sense of dread that something bad was going to happen. I mean, this virus is invisible. We couldn't see it. We didn't know how it was spreading. Was it airborne or some other way? And we weren't sure of the age profiles of people had it. So you're walking out, and even though you might leave your house, you still feel trapped. You're still not sure of yourself. You're not sure how to proceed. And you see people trying to social distance, men and women, and they're not quite sure how to do it, and they're being awkward moving around people. And then there's others who weren't social distancing at all. So it was a crisis on many different levels and affected different people the way. But I think when there is toxic masculinity, you're not able to accept that it affected you.
Yeah. When we look at the last recession that we had here in Ireland, I mean, the end result of toxic masculinity for a lot of people it was a mental health crisis. It turned into, we had a spike in suicide for men who had maybe lost their jobs. They felt they were worthless to society anymore because they couldn't provide for their families, and didn't feel able to talk to anybody. When we look ahead in the next 6 months, we are going to face a recession in this country. I mean, it's bad now. It's going to get worse. I don't like saying it, but we have to be realistic about it. How can we help support men through what's going to come? Because we don't want a repeat of what happened a decade ago.
Yeah, you're right. And it's a difficult one to do. I think as a society, we're probably getting a little bit better. There's a lot more movements globally around programs for men of all different ages to help them develop. But I think as a man who was trying to make my own way around the world, one thing I would encourage men to do was really question the template that they've inherited. And again, this model of what they feel it is to be a man, and is it working for them? And is it getting in the way of their relationships with their partner, with their kids, or with any other aspect of their life? And I think as well, it's also looking at your peer network, or the people in your life who may be propagating this toxic masculinity. Because if you're still, let's say you're trying to work on yourself and you're trying to develop and maybe be more open to your emotions and the actual real challenges that you're facing, but you're still firewalled inside at the root of a lot of these problems, you're not going to really fix them that much. You're not going to be able to be more open and be more congruent with yourself. So you do have to question your peer network and actually explore, well, who are these people in my life? Are they making it worse or making it any better? But I think probably the biggest challenge for men is taking risks and learning to trust people. And I think one thing that fuels any kind of toxic masculinity is experiences of judgment or being shamed, and they stay with us. And I think even if they weren't directed at you, even if you're just a witness to it, it still affects us and it stays with us, and it's a very difficult thing to shake. So it's a case of taking small risks and just opening up a small bit to people and seeing how they respond. And I get it in the counselling practice all the time. I'm sure other therapists do, where people give you little bits of information and they're gauging you really closely to see what your response is like. And they're watching little things to see, are we open to it? Am I okay with what they're telling us, telling me? And then I am open, because our therapists are open to anything. That's our job. We want to listen to people. We want to respond to people. But it's a difficult one. You have to be quite patient with it as well, because not everyone's just going to share everything. I think if you have people in your life who you feel are dealing with this and they're not prepared to open up, a great deal of patience is required. You can't press people to open up. You can't pressurize them, because then you're just fueling the problem. And it's just creating environments where, but everything is fine. It's okay. Don't lose your head. Don't make it a bigger crisis. You're trying to stay as calm as possible, but creating an environment where, look, it's okay to talk about stuff. It's fine. And it's okay to not talk about it as well.
You were talking there about inherited situations and your peer group and things like that. I suppose one example that always springs to mind for me is if you've a little child and it's a girl and they fall and cut their knee, it's, oh, you poor thing, let me give you a hug, are you okay? If it's a little boy, by and large said, dust yourself off, you'll be grand, be a big boy, be brave. And that is actually a very early example of this exact thing. And if you get that, and if that is reinforced and reinforced and reinforced throughout teenage years, throughout their adult life, that's when it becomes a problem. How do we stop it happening in the first place? If you're a mother, a father of a child or a boy, and you want to make him grow resilient, but not fall down that kind of path of trying to stiff over upper lip stuff.
I mean, the example you gave there about big boys don't cry, it's very real and very true, even though we hear it so much at this stage. But I was working with someone recently, and we're dealing with very deep-rooted emotional issues that this guy's carried all through his life. And you're always checking in and making sure he's okay as you go through the process. And I asked him, are you okay with this? Are you okay to go further? And he said to me, it's okay, I'm a big boy, I can take it. And there's a hint of judgment in that, and it's internalized judgment. And it's true, it's a huge problem, but how we address it is a difficult one. It takes a lot of patience. It probably takes more awareness on the side of the parents, because understanding that, where does this come from inside of them? Were they brought up in a harsh environment, which is a reality not for everybody. Some homes are very loving and very supportive, but unfortunately it's not true for a lot of people as well. And we internalize our relationship with our own parents, and sometimes it becomes intergenerational, where all of a sudden we tell ourselves we don't want to behave like our parents or like somebody else that was an influence in our life, maybe siblings, but then automatically we are responding in a way that we didn't choose to do. And it requires a huge amount of awareness to catch it. But you're right, it does. We still have to challenge our kids But it has to be balanced. It has to match their age. It has to match their developmental stage. And if you're pressing them over issues that are just beyond them, then it isn't going to work. You're just going to stress their systems way too much. You're not going to have the maturity to understand it. So in many ways, it's conscious parenting. It's literally just thinking out to see how do I want to be as a parent. And I'm a father now, 6 months. We had a son in January, and I'm constantly asking myself. Thank you. And myself and my wife, we had conversations before we even had our son about how we want to be as parents and the type of household we want to bring him up in. And I think at this stage, it's an interesting time where we are having these type of conversations, and we are aware that we have options and different ways of existing. But to be honest with you, it's about being honest with yourself, taking risks, and having conversations with everyone else is in the home about the type of environment you want to create, and design your home environment as best as you can.
Carl, thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll talk to you again soon. And congratulations again on the birth of your little baby. Now we'll take a quick break, but when we come back, financial advisor John Lowe is chatting to us about how to keep your finances in check post-COVID. Catch us back here in 3.